Fueled by his interest in geometry and art, Richard McKenzie's early artistic creations were geometric forms he eventually turned into sculptures.
I think the thing that moved me the most in the direction of art was the shapes and the mathematics of geometry. So I always traveled around with graph papers, a little dorky, but that allowed me to create these figures, draw these figures, and then turn these figures into what's called maquettes, which are the initial movement in the direction of creating a sculpture. Combining shapes, math, and I think color, blending all three of those, they all come together in that art form. I collected marbles, baseball cards, traded baseball cards, and what I was really into was coins. I think I was probably a little compulsive, obsessive from the beginning because I usually like to collect things in depth and thoroughly enjoyed it. It wasn't so much the end result, it was more a function of the process of collecting.
In the early 80s, about the same time he began to create art, he also began to collect art. As he became more serious about collecting, he began to spend more time going to museums and galleries and studying artist catalogs.
And I started to find artists from gallery openings who had a sense of color that worked with my image of what I liked. And it's really a sense of proportion. It's a sense of, in your mind's eye, what is it that makes something appealing to you?
Focusing on psychologically powerful paintings, the collection crystallized with the acquisition of major works by Norwegian master Odd Nerdrum and American artist Stephen Assail, which set the tone for Seven Bridges' figurative collection. Today, Seven Bridges houses one of the most comprehensive collections of Nerdrum's work, which is universally regarded as unsurpassed in its field. During the mid-90s, new pieces by various figurative and realistic artists fueled the growth of the collection.
I prefer the hard-edged photorealism art, the art that duplicates the real world. The second type of art, which I think may be even more important than that, is the figurative or the quasi-realism, but not quite photorealism art that addresses the issue and brings emotion into the art world as opposed to just hard, cold structure. Art has to put your mind into a spin, so to speak. It has to engender thoughts of what does that mean? Am I threatened by this? Do I understand this? Do I view this as depressing, enlightening? And it will reflect, like say in a Rorschach test, the responses will reflect almost always the security and the insecurity of the viewers. I like the things that I can't do. I like art that I cannot create. I also think it implies an enormous amount of patience for people to spend 3 months on one piece that they'll never know whether or not they will sell. And frankly, I don't have that patience, but I appreciate it and I like to support it.
To house and display the growing collection of art, in 1994, Gallery 1, or G1, was completed.
It's an Adirondack type of building that has about 10,000 square feet of space, which lends itself to both paintings and sculpture.
Eventually, the growth of the collection in size and stature required him to reassess the collection's purpose and meaning.
I had to think about what was the purpose, or what was the meaning, or where does all this go? And that's when Seven Bridges was created.
In 1996, Richard established and funded Seven Bridges Foundation for the preservation and exhibition of works of art in an indoor facility and in a surrounding natural setting.
I like to build something that I can enjoy and others can enjoy. And that's why Seven Bridges is a public foundation as opposed to being a personal collection.
Additionally, the collection took on a broader purpose to inspire and support artistic creation.
Seven Bridges is a foundation that's devoted to artists who have the potential without the means.
One of the ways Seven Bridges Foundation fulfills its mission of promoting artistic creation is by providing financial and resource support to emerging artists.
He once told me that he had the opportunity, and he has a number of pieces by world-renowned artists. There's a Barry Flanagan as you walk in, as you drive into the place. And Richard told me that he thought about what he was doing, and he said, you know what, these people don't need my help. But there are a lot of wonderful sort of emerging artists or established artists that aren't getting the support that maybe they could use. And so that's one of his missions in life, seems to be to buy great art from artists that his participation in their career really makes a difference.
Perhaps the best example is Peter Wojtuk.
In the early 90s, Peter Wojtuk, an aspiring sculptor, was living in Kent, Connecticut. In preparation for a show, he constructed several large bulls out of styrofoam. Although he had hopes of casting them into bronze sculptures, the costs associated with making a bronze are prohibitive.
Artists cannot afford the bronze. They cannot afford to move the bronze. They cannot afford to display the bronze.
To help Peter move his art and career forward, Seven Bridges provided him with the money necessary to cast his styrofoam creations into bronze sculptures.
You know, he believed in me. He did from a very early point, and financed the first set of these bulls. You know, I didn't expect the bulls to ever get cast, but Richard allowed that to happen. After displaying my work at Seven Bridges and photographing it, I was able to procure some fairly good exhibitions and some commissions.
Since then, he has, and for those who know about him, he's had a 4-elephant commission in the North Carolina Zoo. He just recently did a Broadway exhibit with 19 of his pieces.
Starting at Columbus Circle and going all the way up to 166th Street.
Motivated in part by the belief that art begets art, Seven Bridges Foundation transformed the unique and interesting private collection into a resource for artists, students, collectors, as well as community and museum groups.
This is not so much about the study of art, but this is about a visual reference to art. And it will be a successful collection if it is motivational and inspirational and creates wonder, that has people going home and thinking about what they'd like to do, what they'd like to create. I'd like them to say they enjoyed the experience. It maybe was a turning point in their lives, or here's someone who heard another drummer, or here's someone, while being a financial capitalistic type, did something for the fun of it or for helping people, not in the traditional ways, but try to affect their mental processes to dig into themselves and to create things. And I think To some extent, I think we may end up being somewhat successful with that. Well, I happen to have a bit of an obsessive-compulsive collecting tendency.
As the collection grew and filled the walls of Gallery 1, the Foundation began to think about how to best accommodate continued growth.
The collection had then started to outgrow its environment, and the collection was clearly dividing itself along two lines. It was dividing itself into traditional paintings and sculpture versus more contemporary, more hard-edged, more photorealistic art with a much more modern or contemporary bent to it.
Powered by the love of shapes and vivid colors, the Foundation began to add glass art and sculpture to the collection.
I think the glass comes full circle on the notion of the merging of geometry and color.
Focusing primarily on American, Italian, and Czech artists, the collection began to showcase works highlighting the brilliance, transparency, and beauty of glass.
The collection here is probably one of the more significant private collections in contemporary glass in the United States.
The collection also distinguished itself by its impressive representation of the different methods and approaches to glass making.
We have cast pieces, which would be primarily glass from the Czech Republic.
This glass in Czechoslovakia is cast glass, and they represent the oldest, the cast glass people in Prague, of the artisans in that medium. And cast glass is poured and then worked on a series of machines.
Presented with the opportunity to go to Prague, representatives from Seven Bridges met with leading Czech glassmakers, toured their studios, and added a significant number of pieces to the collection.
And what we did is we went to an artist's studio, which was virtually always in their home. Many worked out of their garage. So we covered 9 artists, 3 per day for 3 days. I think I bought 91 pieces.
We also have work that is laminated.
Laminated is where you take sheets of glass and with powdered colored pigment, you attach a certain color to a plate and laminate another plate against it.
The work of John Kuhn would really represent that very well. We have blown glass, of course, which is represented by artists such as Lino Tagliapietra and Dale Chihuly, Dante Marioni.
We can't really talk about this glass without really discussing Lino Tagliapietra, who's dominant in this collection, which means there are probably in excess of 25 of his pieces. Lino, for blown glass, is probably the #1 in the world today. I've been able to see him blow a piece of brand new glass, meaning a whole new series. They usually work in series. I view his work as being so outstanding, and his work keeps getting better.
I would say, without a doubt, Lino is perhaps the greatest living glassblower of our age. Now, Lino is 78 years old, and I feel as though he's probably doing some of the most exciting work of his career. The collection at Seven Bridges also includes Seguso's studio pieces.
These were purchased in Italy, in Murano, Italy, where I had a great opportunity to buy a lot of his work.
What separated Seguso at the time was the fact that he went beyond production glass and he approached it as an art form. The fact that the studio glass collection is shown in context with contemporary painting is really important, because I think that the whole evolution of studio glass has been based on the fact that it is being accepted more and more by the art world, by the mainstream art world. As far as I know, there isn't a museum or gallery that's dedicated to bringing both glass and contemporary painting together in one building. So that's an important thing to note about this collection.
To display the growing collection of paintings, sculpture, and glass, Seven Bridges Foundation concluded they needed to build another gallery.
It then became clear that to continue this process, we were going to need a lot of additional square footage.
Seven Bridges retained Laura Kaler Architects of Greenwich, Connecticut to design a contemporary structure.
The sculpture, the glass, and the paintings, those are more in keeping with a modernistic or contemporary building.
Although the new gallery needed to be contemporary in design, it also had to blend in with the existing structures on the property as well as with the surrounding landscape. We wanted the design of the building to reflect the vernacular barn architecture of the region, so we designed the building to look like 3 stone barns linked by glass connectors. Because stone barns typically have few windows and doors, we opened up these stone volumes with 1- and 2-story cantilever glass boxes. This feature maximizes the flow of natural daylight, which further augments the beauty and power of the artwork, particularly the foundation's collection of glass. The foundation wanted the building to be sited around this one particular large rock outcropping that pierces through the landscape, so the last gallery was splayed open, so the rock looks like it goes right through the building. Construction of Gallery 2, or G2, began in the fall of 2008.
My wife and I had the pleasure of having dinner with Richard when the building was being built. And he took us around, we walked over wood planks, we were there when the wires were not yet covered up within the walls. There were paint swatches on the wall as we all pondered how the colors would look when this was finally built.
2 weeks prior to completion of the project, disaster struck.
Let's see, we're in Palm Desert, California, January 27th, 2010. We get a call 4:15 in the morning. It's Richard's business manager calling from Connecticut, telling us that the gallery's on fire and it's burning down.
There's really nothing you can say to a shock like that.
Next thing we know, we're on a plane that same day, flying to Connecticut.
But we couldn't go up to the site. It was just too painful.
It took 3 months before we went to the site and walked through the building.
It wasn't until Laura introduced us to Jason and the site started to be cleaned up. I think we knew that we had bounced off the bottom of the tragedy.
Devastated but not deterred, Seven Bridges decided to resurrect the project, enlisting the expertise of Jason Borner of Amgen Builders.
I got here one cold, rainy, I think it was the morning. It was actually snowing a little bit, and I was walking the property by myself just looking at a complete disaster. This whole building like falling in on itself. The whole building, stone, steel, everything was all piled up on top of each other. I didn't trying to figure out where I could start, how I could even save any portion of it.
But we hung in there. We have a better building. We have much better people working with us. We learned so much, the foundation, and friends that came to help and contributed when the insurance wouldn't. And 2.5 years later, we have a beautiful building that's a piece of art in itself. We have galleries hung with gorgeous art pieces and sculpture and glass art.
Well, it's clearly the best thing Seven Bridges has ever done. And what it does, it provides a venue to inspire other artists.
So the resurrection of this building and the magnificence of this collection in the building and the architecture is just mind-boggling. Very, very, very beautiful setting, very beautiful work.
Collectors, artists, and students of art will all be affected by this.
Experiencing this collection firsthand and seeing the way the pieces relate to each other is really important. The amount of effort and time that went into placing all these pieces and just finding the right combination of light and balance with the way that they're displayed. It's a great experience.
I look for someone who has brought something new to the art world, something I haven't seen before, something that stirs your imagination, and most of all, something that you'll remember the next day. Then you know you've been touched by a piece of art. I hope this has further created a path that enlightens you or motivates you in some ways to pick up whatever form of art it is where you're creating something that hasn't heretofore existed. A lot of people can have an idea, but fewer people know how to implement an idea. And that, to me, is the difference between a successful venture, whether or not it's for money or for other objectives. It's about the implementation of that idea that's important. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from Emerson's Self-Reliance. And I think this is good food to ponder. And that is, one of the most painful things you can experience if you see your idea implemented by someone else other than yourself.